Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and fellow truth seekers, thank you for being here today. The world once again finds itself standing at the edge of uncertainty. A few days ago, global headlines erupted. Russia's rocket test shocks the world. The news hit like a thunderclap, reverberating through military corridors, financial markets, and political think tanks alike. But as an economist and political analyst, I must tell you, what's truly shocking isn't just the rocket itself, it's the deeper game behind it, the economic signal, the political message, and the global realignment this event represents. The world stood still as reports confirmed that Russia had successfully conducted a hypersonic missile test, an event that has sent shockwaves through every major capital from Washington to Beijing. This was not merely another display of military prowess, it was a seismic geopolitical signal. The test, shrouded in secrecy until its dramatic unveiling, revealed a weapon capable of traveling at speeds exceeding Mach 10, maneuvering through atmospheric defenses with unparalleled precision. The implications are enormous. For the first time in decades, the delicate balance of global deterrence appears to be shifting, and the West is suddenly on the defensive. Military experts describe this as a Sputnik moment for the 21st century, a sudden, unexpected leap in technology that redefines the boundaries of global power. The United States and NATO allies, long confident in their technological edge, are now forced to confront a chilling reality. Their missile defense systems may no longer guarantee protection. The question echoing through intelligence briefings and policy circles is not just how Russia achieved this, but why now? Observers point to a mix of strategy and symbolism. Russia's timing is no accident. Amid tightening Western sanctions and an ongoing geopolitical standoff, Moscow's demonstration of hypersonic capability serves as both deterrent and declaration. It says to the world, we will not be cornered. President Vladimir Putin, long known for leveraging military theatrics to assert Russia's global relevance, has once again captured international attention. This test wasn't simply about hardware. It was a statement of endurance, defiance, and ambition. The shockwaves have not been confined to defense ministries. Financial markets felt the tremors too. Defense stocks surged, oil prices wavered, and global investors began recalculating risk in an already fragile economic environment. The specter of renewed arms competition looms large, and with it, the possibility of rising military expenditures across Europe and North America. Every major power now faces a strategic dilemma: respond with restraint and risk appearing weak, or escalate and risk igniting a new era of militarized brinkmanship. Yet behind the spectacle lies a more profound narrative, one that speaks to the intersection of technology, politics, and economics. Russia's hypersonic achievement is not just about innovation, it's about survival. Sanctioned, isolated, and economically pressured, Moscow has turned to its strongest remaining leverage, military power. In doing so, it has reframed the conversation from economic vulnerability to strategic dominance. This transformation underscores how nations under economic siege often seek legitimacy and leverage through displays of force. The West's response, meanwhile, has been a mix of alarm and disbelief. Officials in Washington have expressed serious concern, while NATO commanders have called for an immediate reassessment of collective defense capabilities. Some analysts warn that this could trigger a hypersonic arms race, a costly and destabilizing contest that would drain resources from pressing global challenges like climate change, poverty, and economic inequality. But for now, Russia holds the world's attention. Its rocket, a symbol of both technological triumph and political defiance, has redrawn the lines of strategic competition. Every successful test flight reinforces not just Moscow's military capability, but its message. Russia remains a force that cannot be ignored. The roar of that hypersonic engine was more than a test. It was a declaration, echoing across continents and rattling the foundations of global power. When the world heard of Russia's successful hypersonic missile test, most headlines focused on the weapon's speed, range, and destructive potential. But behind the gleaming surface of military might lies something far more intricate and strategic, what many analysts are now calling Putin's secret weapon. It is not just the missile itself, it is the message, the timing, and the global ripple effect it was designed to unleash. Vladimir Putin's mastery has always been his ability to wield power not merely through arms, but through perception, through fear, defiance, and psychological warfare that extends far beyond the battlefield. This latest test was not a random display of strength, it was a meticulously calculated geopolitical move. As Western nations tighten sanctions and attempt to isolate Russia economically, Putin has sought alternative ways to project dominance. By unveiling a weapon that potentially outpaces all known defense systems, he has reframed Russia's global narrative from that of a sanctioned state to that of a technological pioneer and strategic powerhouse. The test sends a powerful signal. While Western economies flex their financial systems, Moscow still commands respect through innovation, resilience, and audacious strength. Observers within the Kremlin describe the test as a victory of will over wealth. Russia's economy, under siege and constrained, has poured immense resources into military research, prioritizing technological leaps over consumer stability. This isn't just about national defense, it's a demonstration of economic redirection. Putin understands that in the modern world, military breakthroughs are not isolated from political and financial ones. They are instruments of influence. Each hypersonic flight, each televised announcement becomes a message to both allies and adversaries. Russia may be economically pressured, but it is far from powerless. There's also a profound psychological dimension at play. Putin's leadership thrives on the image of strength, both domestically and abroad. The unveiling of this secret weapon serves as a unifying force within Russia, rallying national pride at a time of inflation, sanctions, and international criticism. It reinforces the idea that while the West controls markets, Russia controls momentum. This is not just strategic defense, it is narrative control, a form of soft power delivered through hard technology. Internationally, the move has left Western policymakers scrambling. How do you negotiate with a nation that continually reshapes the rules of deterrence? Each demonstration of new capability undermines established power hierarchies and forces rivals to react rather than lead. In doing so, Putin has effectively shifted the global conversation from Russia's economic isolation to its technological resurgence. For every sanction imposed, he answers with a spectacle that reminds the world of his reach and unpredictability. But the brilliance of this maneuver lies in its subtlety. The true weapon here is not only the missile, it's the message that accompanies it. It's the ability to redefine strength in a world obsessed with control, to take disadvantage and turn it into dominance. Putin's so-called secret weapon is, in essence, his ability to manipulate global perception, turning fear into policy leverage and surprise into strategic gain. The hypersonic test is simply the latest expression of a much deeper campaign, one that uses power not only to destroy, but to dictate the global narrative itself. The roar of Russia's hypersonic missile test was not just the sound of military triumph, it was the echo of an economy under pressure, flexing its last great muscle, defense. Beneath the spectacle of fire and speed, lies an economic story that is as deliberate as it is dangerous. The test was not merely a show of technological innovation, it was an act of economic messaging, a demonstration of how a nation under financial siege can still command global attention through strategic investment in fear. For Vladimir Putin, this wasn't only about deterring enemies, it was about proving that economic isolation does not equate to irrelevance. Over the past several years, Russia's economy has endured a relentless barrage of Western sanctions, trade restrictions, and currency devaluation. Its industries have been squeezed, its exports scrutinized, and its access to global markets curtailed. Yet, instead of retreating into weakness, Russia has redirected its limited resources toward one of the few arenas where it still holds an advantage: military innovation. The hypersonic program represents not just technological ambition, but economic adaptation. It's a case study in how an embattled state converts financial constraint into strategic opportunity. In a world where economic strength often defines geopolitical influence, Russia's pivot to defense spending underscores a crucial reality. When traditional economic tools fail, nations turn to symbolic power. Every missile launch becomes a broadcast to the global economy, a reminder that Russia still holds leverage through uncertainty. Energy exports, cyber capabilities, and now hypersonic weapons form a triad of economic influence that keeps the West cautious and markets unstable. This instability paradoxically becomes Russia's asset. Investors flinch, oil prices fluctuate, and global confidence wavers. Each tremor subtly reinforces Moscow's relevance. Professor Richard D. Wolff and other economists view this as a fascinating, if perilous, example of militarized economics. In essence, Russia has transformed its defense sector into both an industrial engine and a propaganda machine. Factories that once produced consumer goods have shifted to arms production, creating jobs and fueling national pride, even as living standards decline. The government's heavy investment in the military-industrial complex has insulated certain sectors from sanctions while projecting an illusion of strength. It's an economy that sustains itself not through growth, but through defiance. The West, meanwhile, finds itself trapped in a costly feedback loop. Each new Russian test prompts calls for more defense spending, which in turn stimulates the very military-industrial systems that thrive on perpetual tension. Stock markets react instantly, defense shares rise, currencies adjust, and political rhetoric hardens. The result is an economy of fear, one that benefits the powerful few while burdening citizens with inflation and uncertainty. In this cycle, Russia's missile test becomes both cause and catalyst, a trigger that manipulates global markets without firing a single warhead. What makes this even more intriguing is the psychological economy at play. Russia's demonstration of power feeds a narrative of resilience, positioning itself as a nation that thrives under adversity. It converts hardship into momentum, turning sanctions into symbols of independence. For Putin's administration, every hypersonic test is not just an experiment in physics, it's an economic performance, staged for a global audience. The explosion, therefore, is not just the detonation of rocket fuel, it's the ignition of a calculated message. Russia's economy, though constrained, remains capable of shaking the world. The shock of Russia's hypersonic missile test reverberated far beyond its borders. Within hours, the Western world reacted, not with calm diplomacy, but with a surge of anxiety and urgency that swept through government chambers, intelligence briefings, and media networks. The response was immediate, emotional, and calculated. Fear became the first reaction, strategy the second. Across NATO and Washington, alarm bells rang, not only for the potential military implications, but for what this test symbolized: a disruption of Western dominance, and a direct challenge to decades of assumed security superiority. The West had been caught off guard, and the political machinery began spinning at full speed. In Washington, defense analysts flooded the airwaves, warning that the balance of global power had shifted. Words like unstoppable, unpredictable, and existential threat dominated headlines, igniting public fear and political pressure. It was a masterclass in narrative control, each outlet amplifying the sense of urgency. Within days, Western governments began discussing increased defense budgets, accelerated weapons programs, and renewed investments in hypersonic countermeasures. The missile hadn't just flown over Russian skies, it had penetrated Western wallets and political agendas. The power of fear had once again proven to be the most reliable fuel for policy. Behind the public outrage, however, was a quiet, pragmatic recognition. This event was an opportunity for defense contractors, military advisors, and politicians seeking leverage. Russia's test provided the perfect pretext for expansion. Budgets that once faced scrutiny suddenly became patriotic necessities. Lobbyists in Washington and Brussels began circulating memos highlighting urgent modernization needs, while lawmakers framed new spending as a moral obligation to defend democracy. The result was an economic chain reaction. Stock prices of major defense firms soared. Billions were allocated within weeks for research, missile defense systems, and strategic infrastructure. Fear had been effectively monetized. Propaganda followed naturally. Western media framed the event not merely as a threat, but as a moral confrontation: freedom versus aggression, order versus chaos. In this simplified narrative, Russia became the antagonist in a global story of good and evil. The complexity of the geopolitical and economic context vanished beneath a layer of dramatized certainty. This wasn't accidental, it was essential. By reducing the issue to fear and outrage, governments could rally public support without the burden of explaining policy failures or diplomatic stagnation. The narrative of danger became the shield that justified expansion, spending, and renewed militarization. Yet beneath the surface, many analysts recognized a troubling pattern. The West's response mirrored the very dynamics it claimed to resist. Russia's show of power was met not with diplomacy, but with an equal display of escalation. Instead of cooling the flames, the response poured fuel on them, creating an atmosphere ripe for mistrust and competition. Economists warned that such militarized reflexes could drain national budgets, inflate markets, and deepen divisions across already polarized societies. The arms race, once thought a relic of the Cold War, was quietly being revived under the banner of defense. Professor Richard D. Wolff and other critical voices have highlighted the irony. By reacting with fear and propaganda, the West validates the very strategy Putin employs. Every increase in spending, every fiery speech, and every televised panic only amplifies Russia's narrative of power. The real victory, Wolff suggests, may not lie in the missile itself, but in its ability to provoke precisely this reaction. The West's defense budgets swell, its citizens grow anxious, and its political discourse narrows around militarized rhetoric. In this cycle, both sides feed off the same emotion, fear, while the rest of the world watches the balance of power transform, not through war, but through the politics of perception. The shock from Russia's hypersonic missile test has evolved into something far more subtle and dangerous than a military confrontation. It has become a battle of narratives. In today's world, wars are no longer fought solely on the battlefield. They are waged through stories, symbols, and perception. Every statement, every headline, and every image becomes a weapon in the global information arena. The test was not simply a demonstration of power. It was the opening move in a psychological and political chess game that pits nations not only against each other's armies, but against each other's truths. Russia's leadership understands this dynamic better than most. The hypersonic missile was designed not just to outpace Western defense systems, but to dominate the global conversation. Within hours of the test, Russian state media flooded domestic and international channels with footage of the launch, patriotic commentary, and confident assertions that Moscow had outsmarted the West. The narrative was clear. Russia, isolated and sanctioned, had still managed to out-innovate its adversaries. It was a message of resilience, superiority, and defiance. For the Russian people, this became a rallying cry, a validation that their nation, under siege by Western powers, remained powerful and unbroken. In contrast, Western media portrayed the event as a provocation, a reckless act by an unpredictable leader. Words like aggression, threat, and destabilization dominated broadcasts. Analysts and politicians framed Putin's move as evidence of his ambition to undermine international order, crafting a story that painted the West as the defender of peace and democracy. Both sides, in their own way, were constructing realities that justified their actions and strengthened their political positions. This is the essence of modern geopolitical conflict. It's not just about who has more power, but about who controls the narrative that defines what power means. The brilliance of Putin's strategy lies in this manipulation of perception. By forcing the West to react, he ensures that Russia's story stays at the center of global attention. Every Western condemnation, every emergency NATO meeting, and every televised warning becomes proof in the Russian narrative of Moscow's importance and influence. It's a psychological inversion. Russia may be economically smaller, but in the theater of perception, it appears formidable. The West, by engaging with this narrative, unintentionally strengthens it. The more it warns about Russia's threat, the more it validates Russia's strength. What emerges from this back and forth is a kind of media warfare that blurs the line between fact and framing. Citizens across the world are no longer receiving information, they are receiving interpretation. The truth becomes a matter of allegiance. Each side presents itself as the rational actor and portrays the other as the aggressor. Social media amplifies these divisions, transforming public opinion into a digital battlefield where misinformation and nationalism thrive. The missile test then becomes not just a scientific achievement, but a viral political message engineered for impact, repetition, and polarization. Professor Richard D. Wolff often warns that this war of narratives is more dangerous than the weapons themselves. When discourse becomes propaganda and every fact becomes debatable, the foundation of cooperation erodes. Nations stop listening and start performing for their own audiences. The missile, in this sense, did not only challenge Western defense systems, it challenged global communication itself. The real contest now is not who can build the fastest weapon, but who can tell the most convincing story. In this new era of geopolitical theater, the truth is no longer neutral. It's strategic, and whoever controls it controls the world. As the dust settles from Russia's hypersonic missile test and the echo of political outrage fades, one voice rises above the noise with clarity and conviction. Professor Richard D. Wolff. Known for his piercing economic insight and critique of global power structures, Wolff urges the world to pause, to step back from the brink of militarized madness, and to rediscover the lost art of wisdom in governance. He warns that the real crisis is not in the skies or missile silos, it's in the human mindset that continually chooses conflict over cooperation. His message is as provocative as it is urgent. In a world armed to the teeth, intelligence without wisdom is the greatest danger of all. Wolff views the hypersonic test not simply as a military escalation, but as a mirror reflecting the broader sickness of global priorities. He argues that the trillions spent on defense are not investments in safety, but symptoms of fear, fear that has been commodified, politicized, and sold to citizens as patriotism. When nations respond to economic stagnation or political insecurity by building bigger weapons, they reveal a deeper bankruptcy, a failure of imagination. For Wolff, the true test of progress is not how fast a missile can fly, but how far humanity can evolve beyond the need to launch one. His critique cuts deeper than policy. It reaches into the moral fabric of global economics. The same nations that claim they cannot afford universal health care, clean energy, or poverty relief somehow find endless funds for defense expansion. Wolff calls this the economics of destruction, a perverse cycle in which military spending sustains economies while eroding the very societies it claims to protect. Factories hum, stock markets rise, and politicians boast of national strength, yet ordinary people pay the hidden price through inflation, taxation, and the erosion of public welfare. The illusion of security, he warns, has become the most profitable industry on earth. Wolff's call for wisdom over warfare is not naive idealism, it is a pragmatic necessity. He points out that the greatest threats to modern civilization, climate collapse, economic inequality, and pandemics, cannot be bombed, sanctioned, or silenced. They require collaboration, not confrontation. The same ingenuity that builds hypersonic missiles could build sustainable energy grids or global healthcare systems. The same precision used in weapons design could revolutionize environmental technology, but these possibilities remain ignored because fear pays better than peace. It is this economic truth, Wolff insists, that must be confronted if humanity hopes to survive its own cleverness. His warning is delivered with the force of experience and the calm of reason. Wisdom, he says, is not the absence of power, but the ability to use it responsibly. It is not weakness to seek diplomacy, nor foolishness to prioritize human well-being over strategic dominance. In fact, it is the only path that can prevent a collapse that no missile, no nation, and no ideology will survive. The world's greatest weapon, Wolff argues, is not hidden in silos or laboratories. It lies within our collective ability to think beyond fear. His message resounds like a final alarm. The future will not be won by those who conquer the most territory, but by those who master themselves.